As a funeral director, I hold myself and my employees to certain standards. Death, after all, affects us in many different ways. I cannot, do not, and will not let any odd behaviors I see during these ceremonies have an impact on my professionalism. This is something in which I take great pride. As caretakers of the dead and their families as they say goodbye, we are to be kind, gentle, understanding, and most importantly, we mind our own business. Experience has certainly numbed me to most oddities. Over the many years of being in this profession, I have seen plenty of strange ceremonies. I've seen corpses spat on, both out of malice and the belief that this would protect the body from evil as it lay in the ground. I have witnessed funerals during which the place had been filled with cats walking around as mourners sat and grieved. There was also a time during a surprisingly melancholy funeral during which a cockatoo, belonging to the recently departed, spent the majority of the time screaming over the speeches being delivered. There was even one time when the entire place had been filled with balloons and pizzas were even delivered. It was a real party, one that myself and my employees were encouraged to take part in. There were even times when no one, with the exception of a few family members, showed up at all. During each of these times, not once did my code of ethics falter. I say this with great pride. Once, only once, did I ever break this code. Curiosity got the better of me. The entire ceremony would have been considered normal, apart from a small group, no more than 3 people who came in, saw the corpse, and left without a word. There really was nothing interesting, intriguing, or unique about it at all. There was no family there to speak, to plan the funeral. This does happen occasionally. However, it is always my policy to take the financial burden and put something together. Nothing particularly ornate, but something. Here was such a case. A woman in her late 40s, death by suicide, almost all the blood drained from her body. Very few people showed up to this ceremony. In fact, most of the time, there was no one present. I am ashamed to admit these sort of funerals tend to cause me to become drowsy. Unacceptable, yet I have a difficulty with such things. Funeral homes are made to be comfortable. They give an essence of home to them, hence the name. Gentle music plays, calming colors and soft furniture surround you in a perfect level of light to ease and soothe. Unless you stay busy, you can easily slip into a state of tranquility, even sleepiness. This was one such occasion. My air of professionalism was dwindling towards the end of the allowed time for mourners to come and pay respects, and the body brought to its final resting place. It was at such a time that a young man, who couldn't have been out of his early 20s, in a finely pressed black suit entered. The first person to arrive since the first group of the 3 from earlier. In my bout of shameful drowsiness, I temporarily locked eyes with him and gave a solemn nod in greeting. It couldn't have been more than half a second, but I swore I saw something of a light in his eyes and markings carved and scarred on his face. I closed my eyes and shook my head, thinking I must have taken a half step into a nightmare brought on by my drowsy state. To ease my mind and convince myself this was true, I watched him from a distance. The young man merely approached the coffin, pulled out a folded bunch of papers from his back pocket, slightly lifted the lid of the coffin, placed the papers inside, closed the lid, and began to walk swiftly back towards me and the exit. The entire thing took less than a minute. He quickly marched past me as I tried to catch another glimpse of him. His eyes were downcast, so I couldn't meet them again. But there was no doubting it this time. His entire face was covered with intricate scars, all forming swirling and then suddenly sharp patterns. His exposed hands were, too. It wouldn't have surprised me if his entire body was covered in these scars. As he walked by without acknowledging me, I could see that he was grinning. I felt the breeze brought on by the swiftness and nearness of his stride as he passed, and then I heard what I had to believe was the failed repression of a chuckle. Suddenly, I felt cold. It was as if ice had filled my veins, chilling my blood, and I could swear for a moment my heart had stopped. All of my warmth robbed of me by the mere presence of this man. As I exhaled in shock, for a moment, I swear I saw the cloud of my breath form in front of my mouth. The ungodly chill tore me from my drowsy state. I couldn't bring myself to turn and look at him. Even now, thinking about this man makes me shiver, and I want to look over my shoulders to assure myself he isn't there. This man, I decided then and there, was a living horror. As soon as he left the building, my body seemed to remember it was alive. My heart began pounding, and I fell to the floor trying to catch my breath. I felt as if I had run a great distance in the Arctic. Slowly, the warmth of life was returning to me. Once my heartbeat and my breath had slowed and I could feel the ice leave my blood, I stood and stared at the coffin. So was the beginning of the end for me. This was the one and only time I have ever violated my code. Carefully looking around, making sure I was truly alone, I approached the coffin. Hands trembling, I opened the lid just enough to slip in my hand, felt for the papers, and carefully removed them. This felt like robbery, but I was so compelled and so afraid that I needed answers as to who this man was. This was a mistake I will regret for the rest of my life. I rushed into my office, closed the door, and unfolded what I had recovered from inside the coffin. It was a note. This wasn't too surprising. Many people like to write out their final goodbyes. The image of that man entered my head again, and I felt the remnants of that awful chill. Taking a deep breath, I began to read. Are your questions answered? Death is said to bring all of the answers. Surely you must know your death was not part of some great purpose as you had hoped. Years of toiling and research and pain have led you to a dismal and disappointing end. You knew your journey would lead you to this point. You certainly held to the belief that a sacrifice would be needed, and you weren't entirely wrong. Yet your goal remains unattained. I wish you could see how this makes me smile, Mother. For years you believed I was the one who would bring you your god. For years you and your cult tormented me for answers I never had, for answers none of you could ever possibly understand. Sadly, it is too late to tell you how correct and incorrect all of you were. As you have told me so often, everything was calculated, planned. My conception, my birth, the scars you, all of you, left on my body. Everything was ritually done at the most perfect of times to bring you an oracle, even a fleshy vessel for your returning deity. The stars, the planets, everything was aligned so intricately on the day I was truly made complete. What were you honestly expecting if this god of yours returned? Did you think you would be spared? Did you think you would be offered power? Power is earned, Mother. Else it is only given to those who are truly worthy. You could never prove yourself worthy, and you could never earn what I have earned. I hated you and your precious cult. The things you did to me. You truly thought I could communicate with your gods. You truly believed I would be the one to bring them to this world that you claim needs cleansing. Even now I can feel what they did to me, what you let them, even made them, do to me. The sigils scarred into my skin, the blades of the ritual daggers so sharp, the brands so hot, all of the blood you spilled from my veins, all of the screams and pain you offered from me as a sacrifice, a calling. All of this falling on deaf ears of an indifferent being, long gone from your reach. Every step along the way, the marking, the bleeding, the torture, the pain, and absolute agony were all mere steps along a journey to where I am and where you are now. Perhaps you were right when you said the power was within me, not without. You laying here rotting is proof of that. Although, admittedly, I can't take all the credit. Do you remember the last ritual you performed? I will never forget it. Only 16 and already a great and terrible force. That was when I finally let the power in. You, in a way, bore witness to this. You and your peons drove me over the edge. All of you at once attacking me, holding me down with ropes and chains as you, Mother, painted the patterns along my skin. All of you with your damn daggers carving at me as I begged and pleaded to someone, anyone, to finally free me. None of you heard. None of you cared what this was doing to me. Looking back, it was wise of you to keep me locked away in that small underground room. It was brilliant of you to not feed me enough. This kept my body weak and easier for you to control. Once your bloodlust was satisfied, I lay naked and broken on the stone floor. Perhaps you were wrong about this one, I heard one of you whisper. No, he is right for this. Cut more, another whispered. All of you looking down at me with shame as if I was the one who had failed. As all of you left, I heard the heavy door close and lock behind you. I just kept trying to breathe. I was badly bleeding, as you know. It was good, you claimed. The more blood to give, the better the calling will be. Lying in a pool of my own blood, shivering and broken, I tried to look around the empty chamber, lit only by the candles from the ritual. I would be in darkness again soon. I thought it was the end for me. I thought after a lifetime of imprisonment and torture that this was finally it for me. Rather than feel fear and sadness, I was filled with hate, fury, and desperation. This is what made me summon it. You were right when you said I was made to be special. It came to me, Mother. It stays with me. What did I have to offer, really? Only myself, my broken and frail body. Yet this was more than enough. Through those deep cuts it entered me, filled me with life, force, and power. I had never felt this way. I had never felt as alive as I had in that moment. Once it was locked inside, the cuts closed, the chains broke, the ropes engulfed with the blue flame that danced along my skin without a burn. Stand tall, boy, a voice called from within. For I do not yield. Suddenly I found myself standing in the pool of blood, my bare feet splashing as I looked around the chamber, now clear as day. I could see beyond the small bit of light offered by the candles and witness everything in the darkness. From the altar I removed one of the daggers and held it up to my face, catching my reflection. In the blade I could see my eyes glowing ever so slightly with an internal light. I understood. There is a quote, Mother. Perhaps you knew it in life. A man with outward courage dares to die. A man with inner courage dares to live. This courage and power is deep inside and is settling in nicely. In a strange and ironic way, you were the one who granted me this power. You wanted a god to appear before you. Who was I to deny such a request after receiving such a wonderful gift as this? Oh, the signs began to appear, didn't they? The last ritual, although brutal, proved to work. You had done it. A god was beginning to show you signs. You were right all along about this oracle. Things were finally beginning to fall into place. This horrible, terrible world would soon be wiped clean, and a new world would flourish with gods at the helm. Foolish woman. I learned a lot while I was locked in the darkness with it, Mother. For 4 years, these signs you claimed to witness, the voices you began to hear, the channeling I had done for you, the light in my eyes which burst forth whenever the gods spoke through me. All of it was false. All of it was my doing. You believed all of it. I must say I was pleased with my new surroundings. You had decided I was free to roam the vast house above the old underground of our home. How good of you to do such a thing for your child. Perhaps I should say we, also enjoyed the food. Thank you. The greater the signs, the greater the treatment. Thinking about the night I levitated above my bed and drew the patterns of my scars all along the wall still makes me chuckle. This was the true beginning of my revenge. You never knew how much I still despised you, Mother. The end for you was something glorious, I must admit. You had been so obsessed, so certain that what you were doing was right that you never even bothered to question my so-called visions. What would change now? I was careful to choose the time when I would strike. There would be no subtleties here. Remember the planet alignments? I don't. Then again, I had a very reliable source inform me on what I needed to know. The hour was late, yes, yet it was also perfect. The being within me has a flair for the dramatic. Tremors shook you from your slumber. I made sure the deep cries I made in the old language were deep and powerful to sound as angry as possible. Oh, my eyes lit up the entire room, didn't they? Remember the sound of the wood of the walls cracking? Or how everything made of glass shattered? Delightful. If you were still alive, I'd make you admit you were afraid. Your son under the possession and working with another being beyond your understanding was the last thing you expected to see inside your bedroom that night. Ungrateful woman. My voice, or rather, its voice boomed. You greatly dishonor me and my brethren. Oh, to see you cower to the floor, begging and pleading delights me even now. Mother, did you dare displease a god? For shame. What have I done? What have I done? You asked. I, or rather, we, answered. We grant you knowledge. We honor you with our words, yet you give us nothing. You are, or were, the cult leader, after all. You should have known better. We demand payment in your blood. Prove your allegiance. Drain your body of its life force. Does this sound familiar, Mother? Does this sound like something you have tried to do to another? Honor us with this sacrifice, and we shall return you to reshape the world in our image. That's all it took. You were so afraid, so unquestioning, on your knees, never once taking your eyes off of the son who despised you so much. He called forth a being like this out of sheer desperation to survive. The only thing I wanted out of this life at this point was to watch you die. Did I regret even in the slightest of what I had done? After reflecting on what you had done to me, after this being making me something more than a human, no. You were no more than a pesky little insect I was more than a little pleased to squish. Your ritual dagger levitated over my right hand. I remember how many times you'd used it on me. I remember every scar you made on my body with this wretched tool. Using my mind, I thrust it at you, making it land in front of your knees, the blade sticking into the wooden floor. Do it! With hands I could clearly see shaking, you pulled the dagger from the floor and carefully slit the tiniest cut into your wrist. More! You repeated the slit, quicker this time. Blood began to pour to the floor in a small puddle as you winced from the pain. More! You moved up the same arm and sliced yourself a few more times. The being within me let out a roar which shook the foundations of the house, and my eyes burned brighter. I could hear you crying from fear and pain. It was a delicious sound, but I wanted silence. Using the control I had learned over the years, I made you clutch the dagger with both hands and point it at your chest. Looking at a man who hated you, you shook your head and whimpered. Did you think that would inspire sympathy? Did you think you would touch a heart that no longer existed? You were always a fool. You knew now that you were not in control. The truth is, even if I didn't realize it myself, you never were. You dishonor us! With those final words from deep within me, that dagger, that horrendous thing, entered your chest and silenced that heartbeat at last. I breathed in the scent of it. As your life left your now rotting husk, the being's power rescinded. It was now mostly me taking in the glory of your death. You thought you died at the hands of a god. Now, I happily destroy that delusion for you. You died at the hands of a son you tormented, one who hated you, one with absolute desperation called forth a being not of this world and act as a host for it, so that I could find my own satisfaction. You have been dead for about 10 minutes now, Mother. I might savor the sight a bit more after I finish this letter of confession. Let me leave you with something else besides a dagger in the heart, Mother. Perhaps a small act of kindness, undeserving though you are. Once your body is removed from here, I will be sure to destroy this place. We wouldn't want news about your little esoteric group becoming public knowledge, now would we? I have learned much. The gods are coming, perhaps sooner than you anticipated. But you were wrong about them. All of you are wrong about them. Maybe this is something all of you can discuss when you've joined together again, something to ponder. Don't worry, Mother. You will have your cult with you again soon enough. Strangely, you were right, Mother. I was made to bring about a cleansing to this world. Let it begin with you and your cult. Rest in peace, bitch.